Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew DeSantis,
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro
and welcome to the NYRA Bets Road to the Kentucky Derby.
and the Kentucky Oaks.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the Road to the Kentucky Derby and Oaks with myself and Kaylie here on NYRA Bets YouTube. Before we get into recapping what we saw last weekend at Tampa Bay Downs and looking ahead at a huge weekend at Fairgrounds and also a nice little race out at Sunland Park, let's talk a little bit about NYRA Bets YouTube. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the network. We have race previews, full card analyses, weekly shows like this one, and so much more. So like I said, press that like and subscribe button today. Well, Kaylie, we had a fun week at Tampa last week. Obviously, a lot of coverage with America's Day at the Races. Our own Acacia Clement was down there and had some big things taking place, which we'll talk about in a second. But we're also getting really excited because now we're moving into 50-point prep season with everything kicking off this week at the fairgrounds.
Yes, I'm super excited for this weekend. I think I've been looking forward to the Risen Star for like months now, ever since knowing East Avenue was a probable there. And obviously, the Rachel Alexandra is such an exciting race, named after one of the best racehorses ever.
Yeah.
And also, this race produces so many fillies that go on to win the Kentucky Oaks. I think three or four of the last 11 winners won the Oaks. So, yeah, I'd say it's a pretty productive race this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. It's so interesting to pay attention to the circuits that tend to be most productive. I know we focus a lot here on we have not had a winner of the Wood Memorial go on to win the Kentucky Derby since 2000 with Fusaichi Pegasus. Obviously, all of us up here in New York hope that changes sometime soon. But listen, last year, the Risen Star winner, Sierra Leone. That horse turned out to be pretty good. So
Mhm.
we've had some really great horses. A couple of years ago, a horse like Pretty Mischievous down on the Philly side down at the fairgrounds goes on to win the Kentucky Oaks. So we've seen this Louisiana circuit produce some really nice horses, and that's because you have trainers like Brad Cox and Steve Asmussen and Chad Brown and Kenny McPeak who regularly run their horses down here, and they tend to know what they're doing and getting them ready. So going to be a lot of fun to talk about that. But hey, listen, we had two prep races last weekend at Tampa Bay Downs. And listen, it tends to be a little bit of a speed favoring track on big days. And we certainly saw that in both prep races that were won essentially in gate to wire fashion. But let's start with talking about the Suncoast Stakes for the fillies. Cara, coming off of a long layoff, had not run since the Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies, makes their debut in 2025 and really just kind of blitzed them early and put them away late here coming down the stretch. But as we were talking before we started recording, this race really changed at the starting gate.
Absolutely. When her laugh didn't break, you kind of knew the race was over and Lucara was just going to steal it. I thought Italian Soiree ran pretty well given the circumstances, but I think that her laugh ran a pretty good race, given the fact that she didn't break and she was still able to get up for second in the way she did. But Lucara put on definitely a show. That horse, she jumped right onto my Oaks list after that performance. She should love continuing to stretch out. I was really
Yeah.
impressed by what we saw with her last weekend for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, her laugh reminds me a little bit, and of course, I can't help but bring this horse up, of a horse like Simplification, a horse that I absolutely loved a few years ago down in Florida, because that's a horse that completely blew the break in the Holy Bull and had only ever won one way, which was up
Mhm.
front. And he didn't win the Holy Bull, but he really ran well in that race and showed that he could come from off the pace and pass horses. Next start was the Fountain of Youth. Guess what? Won that race. So I think her laugh really did put together a nice effort, doing something she's not accustomed to doing, coming from dead last and finishing second, showed that she can take kickbacks, she can pass horses. So she answered some questions there that maybe if she had just won in gate to wire fashion, we would still be having about her. So
Mhm.
I think you still have to take some positives out of that effort if you're a backer of her laugh.
You can take some positives out of it. I mean, I don't know if she's a horse I really have on my mind in terms of, the Oaks, but Lucara is definitely a horse that, has every potential to do well in the Oaks. I'm a little
Yeah.
bit skeptical of her laugh, just, the pedigree, but definitely the
Yep.
way that she finished was encouraging for, maybe getting like a mile and a 16th. I just don't see like a mile and an eighth for her, but definitely
That's
ran
what
well.
everybody. Listen. That's what Sarah El Badwi told me about simplification, and then he finished fourth. So listen, you never count him out in the in the big races. But no, I hear you. I think that
Mhm.
Lakar is certainly the horse out of that race that you really
Yeah.
want to take a look at. But I think it's encouraging to see horses like Her Laugh, Italian Soiree. It just speaks to, even if they don't end up being Oaks horses, they just add to a nice group of 3-year-old fillies that we potentially have that we're going to see this summer up in Saratoga, either going 2 turns or maybe 1 turn. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see that group continue to mature. On the boys side, we had the Sam F. Davis. This was one where the top 2 choices, Owen Almighty, John Hancock, they hooked up early. They hooked up the whole way around, and John Hancock showed a lot of resilience, really battling down the stretch. You see him here coming to the top of the stretch head to head. And about halfway through the stretch, it looks like Owen Almighty is going to start putting the head in front of John Hancock here late. And
Mhm.
Hancock fights back on the rail and pulls away late. And you see Camp Hale running a little bit there. You see Poster making up some ground late as well. So interesting race. Again, I don't know how I mean, this was an impressive effort coming out of, to be clear, a debut maiden victory to immediately step up and win a Kentucky Derby prep race and insert himself in that conversation. Ran, I think, an 85 buyer speed figure. So you see a little bit of an increase from a standpoint of what he ran in debut. But
Mhm.
again, I think there are still maybe some questions about a mile and an eighth, mile and 3/16, a mile and a quarter with a horse like this, although the pedigree would suggest he should be able to continue to stretch out. I also tend to think Owen Almighty is probably better around 1 turn, but it's going to be a really interesting group to see how they, where they go next. Presumably, John Hancock pointed to the Tampa Bay Derby.
Absolutely. I thought, just this horse's second career start to battle the way that he did to get that win was super impressive. And like you said, obviously there are some questions, as there are with any horse that's just making his second start ever on the road to the Derby. But I mean, I think what we saw is pretty not promising, but encouraging for this horse's
Yeah.
future. He has every right to continue to improve. It was just his second start, and he showed a ton of maturity. Yeah, I was definitely very impressed by him. And it's crazy that horse Camp Hale ran so well again, but still a maiden. But
Yeah,
that's one that is pretty interesting as well. That I think ran pretty
he is.
decently.
Yeah, he reminds me. He's got a very different running style, and I think he might ultimately end up being more talented. But he reminds me a little bit like Krupe, because Krupe was a maiden for the longest time while he was
Mhm.
on the Derby trail, and then he finally kind of dropped out of the stakes races, went back to maiden competition, got a win, got an allowance win, then came back in the stakes company. But yeah, no, Camp Hale's, that's a nice horse.
Yeah.
He's going to win some races, and so
Yeah.
that was, yeah, I think very encouraging. Let's take a look at the current standings for the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. This is through this past weekend, and so you still see Citizen Bull up top for the boys. Not a whole lot of movement there. You do see a horse like John Hancock move into the top 8 here in terms of point total. Typically, we see 35, 40 points in years past. That's usually enough to get into the starting gate. So some of these horses that already have 20, 25 points, they don't need to win another race necessarily. They just need kind of a second place, third place effort in one of these 50 or 100 point prep races, and they're pretty much so guaranteed a spot in the starting gate. Over on the ladies' side, you see Cara jump up here, tie 10 before the points lead. Like you said, you really like Cara's effort there. You see some other horses like Simply Joking, Her Laugh, Take Charge Milady, who we saw last week, kind of jump up here. So going to be a lot of movement, though, this coming week with those two 50-point prep races.
For sure. We're going to see lots of things change starting now with the braces with the higher points. So should get
Yeah.
pretty interesting now for sure.
Well, one of the things that is interesting is our top list. And so on my side, it's kind of gone in a couple of directions. I still have Barnes up top, and I know there were some people in the comments. Shout out to Mark Palmer. Mark, I love you, and I always read your 8-paragraph long comments. And so, Barnes is one of those horses where when we're making some of these lists, I'm not even making it for what do I think these horses can do today, as much as what do I think these horses are going to do the first Saturday in May. So if you tell me today, who do I like? Well, no, I'd probably have somebody else first if they were running the race today, but they're not running the race today. They're running the race in a couple of months. I just happen to think this is the most talented of the Baffert horses. and that's why he's on the top of my list. Sovereignty, very pleased to see that he's put together some back-to-back works for Belmont. He kind of was doing an every other week thing for a little bit. Now he's putting in some back-to-back works. That's encouraging. I've moved East Avenue up a little bit. Journalism, a horse I'm very high on out in California. That's a non-Baffert horse. Citizen Bull, we've talked about before. Chancer, I kind of moved down a little bit. Listen, I really like Chancer a lot. But that running style just, I need to see him kind of do it against a more competition. Here's a 3-year-old, but he's one that could shoot it right up back up to the top of the list if he comes and really makes a big statement in that Tampa Bay Derby. And then a couple of horses that, we haven't really seen much of. River Thames, more of a projection, a New York bred who has won against Allowance Company. Looks like Fountain of Youth is next for this Pletcher trainee. And then another Pletcher horse, Tip Top Thomas. Horse I really like, finished second to Chancer McPatrick in that Champagne. He's back working. You're going to see him down in Florida, presumably in that Fountain of Youth, probably as the next start. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then the other Baffert horse, Rodriguez, who finished second to Citizen Bull last time out. So, like I said, that's kind of my list. Your side, you moved Cara up a little bit here. A little bit of movement here with some of your lower positions in terms of moving Quiet Side, Quick Kick up a little bit, Ballerina Doro running away a little bit down.
Yeah, so, I kept the top 3 about the same, as they've basically stayed the same since, and moved Cara up past Cipriani, as, Cara has definitely shown more than Cipriani, even though I definitely have a bias. I like Cipriani a lot, but Cara definitely has shown more, so moved her up. And Quiet Side, I think maybe she moved up a slot, kind of not really intentionally, but this is a horse that we just saw run second again. And she just recorded her first work since that race. She breezed 5 furlongs and 101 flat. So that was good to see. But I think that she's a horse. I don't know if she has the potential to win the Oaks, but I know that if she does get in that starting gate, that she's going to run a race, as we've seen her run a race every single time that she's run. So that's, why I keep her up pretty high. And then Quick Kick, I didn't even realize is back on the work tab. I've been looking for that for a while. I guess I haven't checked in the last 2 weeks, but yeah, Quick Kick is back on the work tab. She worked 3 furlongs January 29th, and then now she's working 5 furlongs the 3rd and the 9th. She worked 101 and 40, both of those works. And then Ballerina Dioro scratched out with the fever. I mean, I'm just going to leave her where she is. And then running away, I haven't seen any recorded work since before the Busanda, which it's not too much of a concern now, but definitely we'll be taking another look come Monday when, I circle back with this list.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I mean, this is one of those times a year where you always have to be paying attention to who's on the work tab, who's not on the work tab, who's skipping works, is somebody active anymore or not active? So, you definitely see that happen a little bit where you're like, is this horse still working? Is this horse not? So, that can be a little bit of a deciding factor, obviously, when we're trying to put this together and nail this down. So, going to be a lot of fun to continue to track these. And obviously, we have a big weekend coming up on the Derby side. We have the Risen Star, which I mentioned, 50-point prep race. You see all those points, too, for those underneath finishes as well. Going a mile and an eighth. That's on Saturday. The very next day, Sunday, we got the Sunland Derby. 20 points to the winner there. Interesting horses that we're going to talk about. A couple of Baffert runners. Mile and a 16th. Over on the Oaks side, we have the Rachel Alexandra. Again, a 50-pointer going a mile and a 16th on Saturday. Sunland Park Oaks, 20-pointer going a mile on Sunday. So those are the 2 races that we're going to talk a little bit about. We'll kick things off with the Rachel Alexandra, which is part of this massive 14-race card that they have at Fairgrounds on Saturday. This is a 7-horse field that has been reduced to 6 horses because of the aforementioned scratch of Ballerina Doro by trainer Chad Brown. She spiked a fever. They're scratching her out of this race. Does not seem as if it is anything that will, it's more of just a minor blip on the radar screen for her overall Oaks chances. Nothing that she should be worried about long-term. But as we look at the morning line odds, it's going to impact the betting of this race because she was the second choice to Good Cheer. I know I'm really excited to see Good Cheer. I'm excited to see Simply Joking. This is still a really fun field, even with the scratch of Ballerina Doro.
Yeah, I think Good Cheer obviously is going to go off as heavy favorite. So I tried to come up with a horse to use underneath her at, a big price that I think can run a good race here. I mean, Ballerina d'Oro, it didn't really seem to set up too much for her anyway. She still could have, ran a good race, but definitely doesn't change the dynamics, but the prices for sure. So I ended up putting Bless the Broken right underneath Good Cheer. But starting with Good Cheer, I mean, she's perfect 4 for 4. Her last 3 going a mile and a 16th. So there's absolutely no doubts about the job to be done today. She's coming here off about a 76-day layoff, which isn't really a concern. Brad Cox, first off a layoff of 75 to 100 days. He wins at 22%. And then at Fairgrounds specifically wins at 38%. So I thought that was a really good stat. He's clearly capable of getting them ready off a layoff and excels at Fairgrounds doing so specifically. So this horse, I mean, I don't think that there's a way to get around beating her. I definitely think that you got to think about the horses that are going to go. The 1's probably going to have to go. And then the 4 has some speed. The 6 is going to go. That the 6 is going to go. So, when it comes to Simply Joking, I don't see her getting away with any of the trips that she's gotten away with any horse in here that's going to apply pressure to her. And especially getting a mile and a 16th, I just have a ton of doubts when it comes to that. So I looked elsewhere and, put the dominant best horse on top, Good Cheer, who I know you did. You went for more so of a price with Simply Joking, which makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I definitely don't see a way of getting around Good Cheer in here whatsoever.
Yeah, listen, Good Cheer makes a lot of sense. Like you said, she's going to be the overwhelming favorite in this race. My biggest concern about Good Cheer is 86, 86, 86. That's what she ran the last 3 times out in terms of a buyer speed figure. Is she just an 86 horse? I don't know. Does she have another level to her? We're going to find out because usually fillies do progress from 2 to 3. It would not shock me if she comes out and moves forward from that number at all. I look at the pace scenario a little bit differently than you. I'm not sure the 1 has the speed to go up to the front necessarily. Certainly picking Irad up is a good thing to see. He's going to be aggressive out of that inside rail. But with only 6 horses in the race, I don't know if there's as much need to get and escape the rail necessarily, because it's not as if you have this flood of horses crushing down on you from the outside. And also, Kenny McPeak horses switching off Lasix are such a wild card. I just don't know if she's going to show the same type of speed she's shown before. And then you look at a horse like Aladdin for Tom Amos. I do think that horse is fast, but I just don't know how fast. And Gowell's Delight, same sort of thing, fast. I don't know how fast, though. And both horses can win stalking or coming from off the pace. I think Jaime Torres, we saw him do this with Seize the Gray a couple of times. I think he just tries to steal this thing up front. And I just think he guns it out of the gate and just gets into that first turn and gets this horse comfortable sitting up there. Now, again, part of this is a 6-horse field. If this was a 12-horse field, 13-horse field, I'd probably be against because there's going to be more horses breathing down her neck. She's going to be pressed a little bit more. I don't know if long-term I like her more than I like Good Cheer. In fact, I know I like Good Cheer more, for the Oaks than I do Simply Joking. But I think maybe the way this race sets up, it can kind of help her out. So I'm going to try to beat Good Cheer. Obviously, I'm going to have some backup tickets where I have Good Cheer singled in this spot as well. She's just going to be a really short price. And
that makes a lot
then,
of sense.
I think you and I see Bless the Broken kind of the same way. Could be a sloppy track. This is a horse that ran really well last time out over a sloppy track because there's some rain in the forecast for Saturday in New Orleans. But yeah, going to be a lot of fun to see this one. And you have that other Kenny McPeak horse actually in your top 3 as well.
Yeah, one that definitely caught my eye. I mean, going back to the whole Simply Joking Good Cheer thing, I definitely think, your thought process, I definitely noticed that Good Cheer hasn't improved, necessarily in her last 3 starts. But I do think that, Simply Joking is going to be facing a different animal that's going to come up and catch her this time around than she has been. I definitely, see her being on the lead for sure. But I think Good Cheer has a pretty good chance at running her down, especially stretching out Simply Joking to a mile and a 16th. And then, the Bless the Broken horse, like you said, I picked that horse underneath last time out at a big price, I think.
Yeah,
It
16
was
to
an
1.
off track. It was an off track that day, and this horse's pedigree, really suits a wet track. And I think that there is some rain in the forecast for Saturday at Fairgrounds. So, this horse is, if it's a sloppy track, I know I'm definitely putting this horse right underneath Good Cheer. I think that she ran a really good race last time out. And again, that was on an off track. She got an 83 figure there. So she improved a bit. And it's positive to see them running her back in this spot as well. And then the Kenny McPeak horse that I put in third caught my eye. She broke her maiden in a maiden claiming race for an $100,000 tag. So not really,
Right.
The type of maiden claiming you think. But yeah, and there she was able to break her maiden against Take Charge Milady, who won the Martha Washington. So she did face, some horses in that field, and I thought she ran a good race. She put pressure on the leader, went right to her outside, and she pulled away. And then she was well clear of the rest, and same with the second place finisher, was way clear of the rest of the field. So I think that this horse can, maybe sit off or apply pressure to a horse like Simply Joking. And I think, she has every right to improve here. And, Kenny McPeak bought her at the sale for $17,000. IRAD jumps up for the first time. So I think there's a few things pretty interesting about this number one horse for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have to take, whenever IRAD hops up on a horse, you got to take notice. And yeah, Kenny, he had a little bit of success with a horse he bought for $40,000 last year. So named Torpedo Anna. So he knows clearly how to spot some good bargains, particularly among your fillies. And it should be a fun race. And listen, if this is a race where Good Cheer comes out and dominates, then she really kind of maybe stamps herself as the East Coast contender until we see Muhima run back her stablemate, and then you have Tenma. I think then the top three really become pretty solidified on that Oaks picture. So that should be a lot of fun. And then, like you said, you throw in a horse like Cara. Going to be a lot of fun to see this Oaks picture continue to develop. Over on the boys' side, we have quite the field of 13 horses for the Risen Star, going a mile and an eighth. And this is one where you are also getting the return of a big-time horse, East Avenue, your 9-5 favorite in a 13-horse field, which really does speak to his level of favoritism. Coming back from that disappointing effort at when he was the 9-5 favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, they popped the gates quickly that day. He stumbled out. I feel like half the field didn't get a good trip that day. He really didn't get a good trip. And so he's a horse that looks so dazzling in that Breeders' Cup or that Breeders' Futurity, I should say, at Keeneland, beating a horse like Ferocious so easily and drawing away from the rest of that field. You and I have talked about this race for a while. You've been very excited to see East Avenue run back. He's one that you pointed out what you kind of pick up watching his workouts. He likes his job a lot.
He's just such a happy horse, and he looks incredible in all of his works leading up to this. Brendan Walsh definitely has him ready to go. I've been waiting, to see him run back since that Breeders' Cup. He's stunned on debut. Next start, he again beat Ferocious. He was great there, and then of course just didn't break in the Breeders' Cup. So that was pretty unfortunate, but definitely a toss. And in that race, kind of toss that effort. But he looks amazing coming in here. He put a bullet work, I think, on January 17th when he was first starting working up to this again. And again, like you mentioned, he has a ton of pedigree. The dam is a half to Cody's Wish. He has that deep Godolphin family, and he's just such a happy horse that loves what he does. And that's something that really sticks out to me every time he runs. I know that's, not how you pick a horse, but he has a ton of talent and he has the energy. I think, this horse might be my favorite out of the boys and the girls. So I'm really excited to see him.
Yeah, listen, he's, it's funny. You say, well, it's not maybe how you want to pick a horse, but sometimes it is how you want to pick a horse. You want to see a horse that still's got his ears perked up, that he's excited to run, that he's ready to go. He's a horse. I remember Tyler Gaffleone said it took a lot of strength to pull him up after that Breeders' Futurity victory. Those are the sorts of horses you'll like to look for, stretching out, going a mile and an eighth, going a little bit longer. The question is, can he sit off of horses? Brendan Walsh has said that he does. He regularly sits off of his training partner and kind of comes from a little off the pace a lot of times in the mornings, but we haven't seen him do it in a race yet. So it's going to be interesting to see if you have a horse like American Promise or Jonathan's Way, two horses that have shown speed, gate to wire speed. If they go out up front, does East Avenue, Tyler, does he just kind of sit over and stalk from that second position just to see, hey, can we do this? All right. And we're not even taking much kickback. We're sitting in the two path. We're getting a nice trip, but we're sitting off of another horse and then really be able to draw away at the top of the stretch. So going to be interesting to see this one. And you and I both, we didn't get too creative with this one. We both went with East Avenue as our top selection here. But then we went in some different directions underneath. And so I want you to talk a little bit about a horse that you put second in your choice, which was Built at 5-1.
Yeah, I thought that, looking through this horse's past performances, he looks, a bit better on paper than I considered him first looking at this race. I mean, looking back at the Gun Runner, he got his career best figure there of a 92. He broke pretty sharply there and faced pressure from Magnitude, who was sitting right off of him, breathing down his neck the entire time. He was able to pull away from the field at the top of the stretch there and won in hand by 7 lengths. And there was Admiral Dennis for Under Judgment, and then that horse Magnitude. And then in the Lecomte, in that huge field in the Lecomte, he broke pretty sharply there. He came pretty wide, and then he ended up getting up for second to get to the outside of Innovator until Disco Time ended up out finishing him on his outside. But I thought that was a really nice effort. And, he shows that he doesn't need to be on the lead to win there. I mean, I know he didn't win, but he ran a good race last time out and he was really finishing. So I thought that he was one I'd like to take out of that and use maybe underneath here. He's 5-1 on the morning line. You have some pretty serious horses in there. So I don't see you getting a better price than that, but you could. So I thought that he was one that, and his pedigree, I mean, he's by hard spun out of a Curlin mare as well. And, that he can get 2 turns, and I think stretching out to 1 1/8 miles should really suit him based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, he's an interesting horse, and he really fits the MO of several other runners in this race, of a horse that has run one really big speed figure and then maybe has an excuse for not running a second really big speed figure, but you kind of don't know. And you go, well, are you the 92 buyer speed figure or the 77 buyer speed figure? Which one are you? And so listen, I think that we're going to look back on that Lecomte, and I think we're going to see that race come back stronger as these horses run back, because he broke really wide that day. He came from off the pace. It was a sloppy track that was slowing down throughout the day. I think if you look at different forms like the Rags or Thoroughgraph, they tend to like him a little bit more from that effort because he gave up so much ground going wide, things like that. Obviously, Disco Time, same sort of thing, coming from off the pace and doing that. So, I definitely understand the logic there. I really kind of threw one downfield a little bit with an underneath play for me. When that Septarian at 12-1, this is a horse for trainer Chad Brown that's coming out of the Mucho Macho Man. And that might be the antithesis of a productive race, because we've seen the top 2 finishers from those races, both Guns Loaded and Treaty of Rome, come back to run in Derby prep races, and they have lost by a combined 70 lengths. So those top 2, yikes. I think in terms of Guns Loaded, I think he's distance limited. I think he's a 1-turn horse. And I think the Holy Bull just kind of demonstrated that. In terms of Treaty of Rome, listen, I don't know what happened in that race. Seemed like he was eased up. I know some people speculated maybe, there were some issues there coming down the stretch, but, it was not his day pretty clearly. But Septarian's a fascinating horse, sired by Prodonico, who is, of course, the sire of Medina Spirit, but has a ton of turf pedigree and started out as a horse that was making its debut in a 4.5 furlong race at Charlestown, then goes to Laurel, then gets a private sale to Resolute Bloodstock, goes to Chad Brown. Chad immediately puts the horse in the Mucho Macho Man, where he runs third. And Chad's not deterred. He's continuing to step this horse up into deeper waters, putting the blinkers on, pair of bullet works coming out of that effort. And I don't know, this horse, there's just something interesting here. Flavian Pratt now up on the mount. And when you put all those things together, Chad Brown has not won a lot of Eclipse Awards because he puts horses in over their heads. He tends to know where to spot his horses. And if he's spotting this horse in the Risen Star, maybe there is some ownership pressure and things like that, but there's easier spots to potentially try to get your horse some points for the Kentucky Derby Trail. He could easily bring the horse up here to New York, something like that. But the fact he's running him here, I don't know. To me, it kind of indicates that Chad sees something in this horse, or at least that this horse has been showing him something in the morning workouts. So I'll take a little bit of a risk at 12-1 and could end up with some egg on my face if this horse runs back the way the top two finishers of the Mucho Macho Man have to this point.
I like that logic, though. I mean, you're getting a pretty big price of 12-1 on a Chad Brown horse, and this is the only horse that he has in here as well. So, I mean, very meticulously placed in here. Clearly, he knows where to place his horses, and pretty interesting, where this horse was running, and then he ends up here. So I think that's a nice horse to take a shot with underneath for sure.
Yeah, and then you and I both have the same horse in third, which is Jonathan's Way. You're 4-1, second choice essentially for trainer Phil Bauer, a horse that really dazzled in debut up at Saratoga and came from well off the pace that day to win so impressively. I remember that start, and it was the very first race of the day on August 17th, and then comes up to win the Iroquois in gate to wire fashion. Obviously, much like other horses, didn't have the best Breeders' Cup Juvenile, kind of mid-pack and faded a little bit, but then came back in the Kentucky Jockey Club and ran what was a decent second-place effort to First Resort, finished ahead of a horse like Tiz-tastic, who I know a lot of people have a high opinion of, now kind of coming back from a little bit of a layoff and has been working very, very well for Phil Bauer. I do have some questions about distance with this horse, sired by Vekoma, out of a dam that has largely produced dirt sprinters, but the horse has been incredibly consistent, at least to this point. It's hard to envision him not running at least a decent race.
Yeah, that's exactly why I have him third as well. I mean, you can't count him out here. He could, take a piece here just based off of class and the talent that he's shown. But like you said, there's so many questions when it comes to Vekoma, going a mile and an eighth. I mean, I don't even like them going a mile and a 16th. So I am having a hard time, picturing it. But I will say that his last start, coming off the Breeders' Cup, like less than a month after in the Kentucky Jockey Club, was pretty impressive given the fact that he was bumped, came pretty wide, and I thought that he ran on well to chase First Resort, who was off. So, I mean, I thought that was a pretty good effort, but yeah, I could only find one Vekoma, I think, that one going a mile and a 16th, and that was a maiden race. I'm not sure if I'm wrong on that, but I was trying to filter out to just a mile and a 16th. So yeah, there's, like you said, the dam was a sprinter. So there are definitely tons of questions here with this one.
Yeah, and a little stat I know that I've looked up. If you read my column on NYRA Bets for this race under Race of the Week, I mentioned this in my analysis of Jonathan's Way. Vekoma, his offspring, the average winning distance, 6.2 furlongs. Now, you might say, Matthew, he's a first crop sire. All these first crop horses, they start out running 5.5, 6 furlongs. Of course, a first crop sire is always going to have a lower average winning distance than a horse like Medaglia d'Oro or Curlin or Nyquist or any of these more established sires. Absolutely right. But let's do a comparison of another first crop sire, McKinsey. His offspring already have a 7.1 furlong average winning distance. So we've already seen quite a differentiation between the Vekomas and the McKinseys. And I'll give you another one, Game Winner, who I'm not even that high on as a sire, 6.7 average winning distance furlongs compared to 6.2 for Vekoma. So again, I like these Vekomas. They're clearly very precocious, but I do wonder if they're just one-turn horses. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is something just to keep an eye on. Underneath, we both try to get another little bit of a price in that fourth spot. You go with a horse like American Promise, who I know you've always been a fan of.
Yeah, and I thought this horse got such a terrible ride in his last start, not for nothing. I mean, I know it was a young rider on him. That's lots of pressure in a race like that, but I just thought, this horse got just caught into every tricky situation in that race that he could have. He kept getting stuck behind horses, and he's going to have to go probably from the one hole on Saturday, but I think this is a horse that has run pretty well, especially lately, and seems to be continuing to improve. So I put him fourth. I mean, I don't think that he's going to compete with the likes of East Avenue and some of the other main players in here, but he's a pretty talented horse and he just keeps getting better. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is a horse picking up Keith Asmussen now on the mount, who, of course, won with Lemon Muffin last year for D. Wayne Lucas during the preps for the Oaks Trail. Yeah, I mean, Keith is probably going to have to send from that inside rail a little bit, but this is a horse that won over a wet track in gate to wire fashion and registered that 95 buyer speed figure. And again, if you can run back to that, then he's a pretty serious contender. The horse I went with a little deeper underneath is Vasimo for trainer Todd Pletcher with Irad Ortiz Jr. up. This is a horse that broke its maiden at Gulfstream Park doing that one-turn mile and then immediately stepped up to win, going 2 turns at Tampa Bay Downs. Irad stays aboard, has ridden this horse all 3 times. I like the progression, 73 buyer in debut, 81 second time out. I feel like this horse has another step. Nyquist sired. Dam has produced some nice horses. Pletcher switching off Lasix, which it should be pointed out, this horse ran with Lasix last time. Switching off Lasix in 3-year-old dirt route graded stakes races for boys, 7 for 41, 17%. But here's the kicker, $4.69 ROI. In other words, when he wins these types of races, he tends to win them with a little bit of a price. You see Vasimo at 8-1 in the morning line. I don't know if you get 8-1 necessarily. I feel like I've heard a little bit of buzz about this horse from some people online. So I do wonder if maybe this ends up being a little bit of a wise guy horse. Maybe gets bet down to a 6-1 territory, but still going to be interesting to see this race. Can't wait to see the results of how this all kind of turns out on Saturday afternoon and evening. But listen, we got to head to Sunday fun day. We head out to my old neck of the woods, Sunland Park. I used to live in El Paso, Texas, and Sunland Park's just down the street. And so Sunland Park Oaks, we have a 7-horse field. And, you know, it's pretty hard to get around the Baffert horse in this race. Maysam, 9-5, coming out of a maiden victory. But from a buyer speed figure, really doesn't have much competition in this race.
No, not whatsoever. I mean, Steve Asmussen has 2 in here that are pretty interesting, both by Gunrunner, that maybe can take a step up here. But, you know, this Baffert horse, you know, on debut, I think got a 74 and won pretty impressively. And I didn't see any of that from these other runners. So I tried really hard to get around this filly, but she's definitely a single on any ticket, in my opinion. And I think that, you know, she could wire the field here. So that's why I put her on top. And, you know, the other 2 horses, the Steve Asmussen horses, are pretty interesting. Like I said, both by Gunrunner. I looked more so at the number 2 here. He looks to be maybe second. She looks to be maybe second best on paper here. Kind of want to see how she runs back, switching back off Lasix today, but has some sire power and last out won by 4.5. So I thought that one was pretty interesting to use underneath the Baffert. But yeah, I think that Baffert's debut was pretty impressive, and she can regress off of that and still win here. So,
yeah, she absolutely can. I mean, she's a tough one to get around. I don't think you get anywhere near 9-5 on her. I'd imagine she's going to be odds on or even money come post time in this race, just because there's really not a lot of competition here. I will say, much like you, running and gunning, obviously caught my eye as a horse to potentially use underneath for Steve Asmussen. Enchanting, maybe a little less so, the other Asmussen horse, but certainly wouldn't be shocking to see that horse run well. The horse that I'll give a little love to, who I know you have in your 3rd spot, I have in my 2nd. I mean, we pretty much see this race the same way, is Rogue Justice for Todd Fincher, 10-1 in the morning line. Horse is stretching out from sprinting 6.5, but is sired by Constitution. You would imagine this horse would be able to handle going a little bit longer, particularly on a speed favoring track like Sunland Park. So I was willing to take a shot. And Todd Fincher is a trainer who knows his way around the Southwest. Obviously, we know him best from Senior Buscador, but he's really made a lot of money out there. Turf Paradise, Zia Park, Sunland Park, you know, obviously Southern California as well. But he knows what he's doing. And Florent Giroux coming in for the day and picking up the mount on this horse. So I thought this one, and you see what Fincher's doing, putting a lot of foundation into this horse, just gave him a 6 furlong work leading up to this race. So getting this horse ready to go a little bit longer, building up that conditioning. At 10-1, crazier things have happened at Sunland Park, that's for sure. So I just thought that one was at least worth mentioning. And if I'm trying to make a little bit of money in an exacta, I'll probably throw that one in.
Completely agree. Yeah, this one's obviously still a maiden, but I thought that she ran better as a maiden in that listed stakes than some of the others that are running back in here today did. So I thought this one is pretty interesting underneath and should probably take a step up here with Florent Giroux getting the ride for the first time as well. So.
So then we'll head over to the Sunland Derby, and this one is going 1.16 miles for the boys, and we have a field of 9, and we have another pretty strong Bob Baffert favorite here in Getaway Car, who we last saw finishing second to a pretty nice horse in the form of, who was it? Oh, that's right. It was Journalism, the horse that is on my top 9 list at the number 4 spot. So, and he outfinished a horse like Gaming, who I think a lot of people maybe had a pretty high opinion of. But Getaway Car is a horse. Long term, I don't know if I like him going 2 turns. I think long term, he's a Pat Day Mile type of horse. He's an H. Allen Jerkins type of horse. He's a Woody Stevens type of horse. He's a 1-turn horse, I think, long term. But I think in this field, against this level of competition, he can get 1.16 miles. And again, if you just look at the speed figures, which I know you don't want to be beholden to those, but it's pretty hard, even if you look at the class levels, to really make a case against Getaway Car in this spot.
Completely agree. It was, immediately put that horse on top. I mean, he towers over the rest of this field. And there's definitely some others that are pretty interesting in here, but I just don't see them beating him. I completely agree. He's probably going to end up being a 1-turn horse, but here, I mean, he towers over the field, so he should be able to win here just based on class and what he's shown so far. But I thought that the Mackenzie Street, has a trainer change now. Trained by Justin Evans. So that one was kind of interesting to me. I mean, we've seen this horse show some talent already, and he looked like a clear second place horse for me here. He likes to be forwardly placed, similar with Getaway Car, but this one can come more so from, third or fourth. And possesses maybe that ability, doesn't really necessarily need to sit on the lead. But yeah, this was the clear second place horse to me. And then I used in third the Wesley Ward horse, who's switching back onto dirt after running at Turfway last time out. But his dirt figures fit pretty well here as well. I mean, in terms of who's going to be underneath Getaway Car, his figures fit pretty well there. He's a horse that can also come from mid-pack as well. So when you have a whole bunch of horses maybe up on the lead, this horse's running style should maybe suit this race here, and stretching out to 1.16 should help him as well. It's sired by Nyquist. So thought that one was pretty interesting as well, the number 8.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely like Touchy quite a bit. It's my second choice in this race. And for Wesley Ward, the horse has largely run the same buyer speed figures over and over and over again, stretching out. But like you said, the Nyquist influence up top out of a Malibu and Moon mare, you would imagine 2 turns is not going to be an issue. Another one that's been consistently working 5 furlongs to kind of build up that conditioning, I would imagine. So plenty to like there. Joel Rosario travels out to this track to stay on the mount. So like a lot there. I'm a little less bullish on Mackenzie Street. If you had to make me pick a 4th horse, that would probably be Mackenzie Street in this spot. But that's a horse that it's just headed the wrong direction. And maybe the trainer change, really is the spark, and kind of gets this horse back for sure. Because you're right, this horse showed talent and finished second to Gaming in that Del Mar Futurity, even finished third to Citizen Bull and Getaway Card in the American Faro, but just really did not look great in that San Vicente race with Barnes and Romanesque and Bullard that day. But like you said, maybe the trainer change makes the difference. And this horse has been working nicely for Justin Evans leading up to this race. So there's plenty to
Maybe
like
getting
there.
on a different circuit too. I was kind of curious why, the trainer change, and maybe this horse just wasn't really cut out for the California circuit based on the way that he was running. Maybe they thought that he'd be better suited on another circuit. I don't know. So based on what he's shown so far, figured I'd, use him in some way here and take a shot with him. Excited to see how he runs with this new trainer. So
yeah, absolutely. And so I'll just give a very quick shout to the number 6 horse, Take Charge Tom, 8-1 for Robertino Diodoro. This one is a perfect 3 for 3, has won all 3 of those without Lasix. listen, I don't know in terms of long-term, is this a horse that, really has a, Kentucky Derby pedigree? Maybe not. But again, one going a mile at Sunland Park last time out in what was essentially a prep for this race over a couple of other runners here, and has the ability to sit off the pace at 8-1, maybe a little bit of a value play there. So, maybe try to catch a little bit of a price in your deeper verticals when you have Getaway Car up top. But listen, there's a lot going on this weekend, and Kaylie, always appreciate your time to talk about this, and excited to come back and talk to you next week about what we saw from this past weekend. And we got another big weekend ahead coming up next week.
Me too. I'm super excited and cannot wait to see how East Avenue runs and to talk about it next week.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Road to the Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. For Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.